Hello, everyone. I'm honored that you came to listen today, and I hope that you will use this to keep you company while you work or while you walk, or maybe you're just sitting still, resting, or maybe you're not feeling good and you just need to hear something. And so today I'm going to start out with uh, Brian Kozlowski's book, The Jane Austen Diet, in which he has gone through the Regency period and the Jane Austen novels and drawn out a lot of their habits and their likes and dislikes and the way that they operated in a given day. And I recently have read to you the mind-body connection that they already knew how important it was, and also so that's on a previous post, and so I will read to you today on the dirt. Oh, I never mind dirt. Now, I'm starting out reading this book for the ones who'd rather just hear the story and not listen to the other things, but so I'll include everything else at the end. Okay, so this is in a chapter called A Taste for Nature. Now, previously I read to you about their desire to breathe the air and to get some fresh air. And I was reminded that in the olden days, we had kitchens where there was a door that you could just step straight outside. And you know how hot it gets in the kitchen when you're cooking or when you're washing dishes. It gets a little bit cloisome and exhausting, and we could just open the door and just step out. And so I was reminded of that, how easy that was. You didn't have to go down a long hall or walk into a porch or a foyer. You just stepped outside. And so those kitchens were designed that way on purpose. And the modern kitchen doesn't allow us as much fresh air. We also had the screened-in porches where you could leave a door open, and then there was a little place just before you got outside that was all screened in that was still let in the outdoor air. So this little section is called, Oh, I Never Mind Dirt. Don't be afraid of good, clean dirt. Lizzie certainly isn't. She splashes about in mud on her walk to Netherfield Park, bearing her soiled hems with pride. You know, in the scene in the 1995, I believe, production of Pride and Prejudice, the actress did it with such grace. She didn't even mind walking. I'm sure that was real mud, too. She didn't seem to mind walking through it. And I remember growing up playing in mud puddles and mud, and I don't see that so much today, but I thought it was okay at the time. And of course, being a mother, I didn't care for them to do that because it's a big cleanup. But the evil Bingley sisters are evidently disgusted. She really looked almost wild. I hope you saw her petticoat 6 inches deep in mud. Today, they'd be squirting bottles of hand sanitizer down Lizzie's throat if they could, though Lizzie could easily outwit them. In fact, living with a more relaxed attitude towards dirt can give all of us clearer heads. That's interesting. No, I don't like bacteria, but I like dirt. I do have a garden. Getting a bit dirty gets us in contrast with the friendly bacteria in soil. And I cannot pronounce this word, and I haven't reread this ahead of time. Microbacterium vaccae, usually inhaled whenever people potter about in dirt. It reduces anxiety by boosting the positive brain chemical serotonin in ways very similar to the antidepressant pills. Garden soil and garden air has always been the best source of this natural high. Do you ever wonder why you feel so good after you've just gone out and maybe just dug 1 or 2 potatoes? There's something, it's like a happiness elixir. I also feel very almost justified because I went out and dug a real potato. Charlotte Palmer is clearly a happy soil sniffer in sense and sensibility. Merely strolling through the gardens and greenhouses at Cleveland raises the laughter of Charlotte to giddy heights. I am quite in the dark. Now, I have read this to you before, but since it's in the same chapter, I'm going to go ahead and repeat it. As night falls on Austen World, Jane's nature prescription comes full circle, meaning the residual bonus of soaking up more natural light and fresh air during the day is the amazing sleep it can give us at night. You know, everybody goes through a sleep disorder, it seems, these days, and the amount of real air and real light outside might have an impact on that. It might change things a little bit. It gives us an amazing sleep, the sort of deep slumber Marianne sinks body and heart into, rising the next morning with recovered spirits and happy looks. Or the sound sleep Catherine immediately fell into, lasting 9 hours, from which she awoke perfectly revived, in excellent spirits, with fresh hopes and fresh schemes. Though if you really want to sleep like Austen worlds romantically reclined, enjoying the full body cure of the night's rest, you'll need to reacquaint yourself with the Regency rhythms and natural essence of night itself, darkness. Now, I'm sure most of us haven't liked darkness too much, but this morning when I got up, it was still dark, and I had on my list that I wanted to go outside, and I had a few things still on the line that I wanted to bring in, and I was waiting and thinking, I'm really in the mood to bring that in, and I really want to go outside, so I did it anyway. And because the light was gradually coming, I wasn't thinking that it was going to be darker, and the exercise did me good. Darkness isn't exactly the top buzzword associated with Jane Austen nowadays. Thanks to Hollywood magic, most of us now picture Regency nightlife as an endless round of bright ballrooms for busting a move under the million-watt chandelier. But the truth requires we turn down the dimmer a bit. As Austen verifies, hers was a much darker night. No electricity, street lamps in the country, or glares from television sets meant that when it got dark in Regency England, it was truly literal and most palpable. In Northanger Abbey, night brings darkness impenetrable to the world. The same immovable darkness prevents the ladies from venturing outside in persuasion. The nights were too dark for the ladies to meet again till morning. Firelight and candles were the only countering luminescence inside, making the helpful glow of moonlight so delightfully important to Jane and her contemporaries. The best Regency balls were only held on full moon nights. That's interesting. Ensuring the partygoers could travel safely to and fro under its silvery light. Sir John, for instance, can't rustle up any last-minute company in Sense and Sensibility for just the reason because it was moonlight and everybody was full of engagements. Now, we're not watching the particular nights that the moon is full anymore because the world has us on some kind of a schedule for what we do in the evening and at night, and it's usually involving entertainment or some kind of social life. And we all have the electric lights. We're not paying attention to this, but what if you were to live by the size of the moon and adjust your evening activities according to that? That would be interesting, wouldn't it? And it's a lot of enjoyment, if you're homeschooling your children, to let them stay up when the moon is out, where there's moonlight actually coming into the house, and to talk about it, let them see it. For most of Jane's life, nights never got much brighter than what nature allowed under a full moon. There are undoubtedly many who would not say the same. If you want a visual of how utterly un-Regency our nights have become, take that globe-looking thing spinning in Gwyneth Paltrow's hand in Emma, pop a flashlight in, then jab it with about 1 million tiny dots. That's basically what our nocturnal world looks like from outer space. We are splendidly lit up, as Austen would say, though scientists would more bluntly label it light pollution. More than half the world's population lives under a nightly sky brighter than the brightest full moon, and it's not just harder to see the many stars Fanny easily spots on a clear night at Mansfield Park. It is a pity. I'm sure it's for our own safety, but in a neighborhood, and even out here in the country, next to the manse, between the manse and the meeting house, somebody has put up one of those lights that comes on at night and lights up the parking lot and lights up the lawn in front of them. And it is a pity because we don't get to experience the real moonlight and the real night. And if you've ever gone for a walk in the moonlight, it's very enchanting, and it's really enjoyable to walk at night with children if they're willing to do that. Sure, we've gotten used to it. Our eyes have adjusted. The darkness or dimness is only a switch we flick right before we hop into bed. But if we listen to Jane and science, we're using darkness, or rather not using it all, not using it all wrong. Now, this is interesting because we don't ever get to completely wind down. It's like lights on, get into bed, lights off. But in reality, if we were doing it according to nature, your mind and your body would naturally prepare for this final descent into sleep without the lights. One of my favorite scenes in Pride and Prejudice is Darcy walking down the halls of Pemberley holding one of these candles that have a little handle on it. It's on a little dish, and going down the hall. I always thought that was kind of interesting. So years ago, I got myself one of those and a lead light taper candle and started shutting everything down. Turned that on and start shutting everything down and walking down the hall till I got to the last room, and just to experience it, because it slowed me down a little bit and also made me think of people before us that did it that way. The evening is closing in. First, the darkening night sky should compel our bodies to wind down. Natural darkness was an impenetrable barrier to how much work Austenites could accomplish at night. This was Jane's closing in time, when shutters were drawn, candles were lit, and people settled in for a quiet evening. Balls, of course, were periodically attended, and moonlight walks in summer a special treat. But by and large, this was no occasion for serious exercise or work. And I always thought that when you're going through a kind of sleep disorder, that you might try closing off those lights earlier and watch the gloom come in and see if it has an effect on your body and also help you sleep. General Tilney's insistence that he must work late into the night at his desk in Northanger Abbey is markedly odd and not very likely to Catherine. There simply wasn't enough light to make it productive. Austen speaks of the rosy dimness of Regency candles. They emitted enough light for the usual evening amusements of Austen world, reading, playing cards or music, but not enough to get too often much wilder than that. Yawns gradually commenced, and by 10 p.m. the majority of Austen world is ready for bed. And that is a signal that the ancient lights, the little oil lamps or the candles, might have had less of a negative impact on the brain than the LED lights or the electric lights, and that they may have been able to sleep a lot better because of it. Today, most of us only experience this Regency nighttime ritual on camping trips. As the sun sets, and with only the amber light from a fire, our bodies instinctually settle down, popping into sleeping bags far earlier and more tired than usual. Normally, however, closing in at night means clicking on. Bright lights and even brighter screens mean we can now work and exercise at whatever hour we wish, though ignoring the cues of darkness comes with unintended consequences. Sickness, for one. Working too frequently at night is now listed as a suspected carcinogen by the American Cancer Society. The biological stress involved in overriding your body's natural desire to wind down at night can wreak havoc on your immune system, not to mention your sleep quality, as Austen well knew. Being too busy or stressed at night is the one thing that guaranteed to keep Austen characters up and buzzing. "I have passed a wretched night," says Marianne, stressed out by that scoundrel Willoughby. And when that happens, Austenites rely on that same old-fashioned darkness to wind them back down again. Personally, I don't think it's a coincidence that Austen's darkest book, the faux mystery novel Northanger Abbey, is also her only book to use the term sleeping potion. Natural darkness is indeed the most effective, safest, sleeping potion most of us are missing out on. Its nocturnal magic revolves around the aforementioned hormone melatonin, an important brain hormone intimately coupled with the rhythms of night itself. Melatonin helps us relax and unwind, naturally drowsing us up for a good night's sleep. Melatonin is what makes sleep, as Austen says, our likeliest friend, causing us to fall asleep faster and enjoy deeper slumbers when functioning properly. And that requires dimming our nighttime world to more Regency-appropriated levels. If you're on any kind of prescription drug, you may think you are sleeping, but it interferes with your deep sleep and your dream sleep and other types of sleep and can wreak havoc on you years later. And so that's why we need to go back to what God has provided as natural, that the cures of life are in the nature that God created. To use an Austen metaphor, bright lights turn off melatonin like Mr. Collins turns off Lizzie. It's a biological reflex. In nature, bright light from the sun is only prevalent during the day, and we don't need or want melatonin's drowsy side effects. But when the sun sets, when we do need melatonin to calm down, artificial bright lights can delay the whole process, tricking our brains into believing daylight is still going strong. Yes, Regency candles were technically artificial lights too, but they weren't nearly bright enough to turn off melatonin. The same can be said today. Makes me want to have the candles. To put our modern nighttime brightness in perspective, flat-screen TVs and computer monitors now emit the light equivalent of 400 to 1,000 Regency candles. More than enough light to suppress melatonin. In a 2014 study conducted by Brigham and Women's Hospital in Boston, simple screen time on an iPad at night had far-reaching effects. People secreted less melatonin, took longer to fall asleep, had less restful REM sleep, that's what the pharmaceuticals will interfere with, and felt more tired the following day despite getting 8 hours of sleep. The top culprit in all of this is blue light. We see no blue, said Austen, and quite right. Blue light was totally absent from Regency nights. But it's one of the prime illuminators today. Our TVs, computers, and smartphones all emit it. A constant blue glare, no matter the colors depicted on the screen. Don't believe me? Stroll around your neighborhood at night, and you'll see living room windows aglow with the same shade of blue. Actually, never mind. You'll probably look like a creep, so just take my word for it. Don't you remember one of the artists of the 1980s and 90s who painted light in windows of Victorian-style houses, said that he got the idea because when he went for walks in the neighborhoods, the houses that exuded the most warm light were the ones that were just using fireplaces, and the ones that had the TV on had the blue lights. The basic problem is blue light doesn't scream nighttime to your biology. Quite the opposite. As far as your brain is concerned, blue light means morning light, natural morning light being high in blue wavelengths. Now, that's interesting, isn't it? If you're an artist, I think you probably notice this more. People that like to paint in the morning and they notice the light, the color of the light is more bluish. So your body's top cue to wake up and start another day is the blue wavelengths, not to wind down after a long one. Melatonin, therefore, gets dramatically suppressed, and we end up more habitually wired than Mrs. Bennet. I am sure I shan't get a wink of sleep all night. This, however, is easily put to rights again by passing the evening with more Regency scents. Let's see what that is. The Austen closing in ritual. The Austen closing in ritual as a reminder to close down those screens, especially phones and computers, when it gets dark outside. Just 2 hours of screen time before bed is enough to suppress melatonin. Reading an actual printed book under normal lamplight will not. Well, now that's interesting, isn't it? Mr. Woodhouse instructs us to keep reasonable hours at night, avoiding stressful work after it gets dark. Few things are so serious that you can't tackle tomorrow with fresh hopes and fresh schemes. That's a quote from one of her books. And while the occasional late night out is perfectly admissible in Austen world, Regency balls could keep bouncing until 3 o'clock a.m. Jane's characters are usually in bed by 10 or 11 p.m. Emulate the softer glow of Regency candles by switching on dimmer, warmer electric lights at night. Candles and traditional low-watt light bulbs both emit rays on the reddish end of the light spectrum. Reddish light is associated with sunset in nature and thus has the least negative effect on melatonin. Fluorescent and lead white lights, however, trick your brain into thinking it's full daylight again. Once in bed, recreate the deeper darkness of Regency nights. After her candle snuffs out, darkness impenetrable and immovable filled Catherine's bedroom in Northanger Abbey. So close tight your curtains and get rid of the unwanted beams of electric light, especially the blue glow from some alarm clocks. Ooh, alarm clocks, no. Even if your eyes are closed, the photoreceptors on your skin can pick up any ambient light in the room, suppressing melatonin and affecting the overall restfulness of your sleep. And here's a quote from her. I would not have you sleep in such an error for the world. Regency stargazing. If nothing else, Austen compels us to remember the easiest nature prescription at our disposal. Simply looking at it does a body good. Nature puts things in proper perspective, reminding us to take a breath. That's why it's so important. I know you can say, click off your list, yes, I went for a walk today, but what are you doing? What are you absorbing? What are you appreciating? Are you understanding this very fact here? Nature puts things in proper perspective, reminding us to take a breath, and that despite all the daily terrors of life, the earth is still turning and everything will be okay. How important that is, just to go outside and reassure yourself that everything's still there. And gazing at starlight night does it for Fanny Price. When I look out on such a night as this, I feel as if there would neither be wickedness nor sorrow in the world, and there certainly would be less of both if the sublimity of nature were more attended to, and people were carried more out of themselves by contemplating such a scene. This is really, really important. And if you're homeschooling, of course I'm homeschooling you right now, go outside and tell your children what they're supposed to be looking at and how they can absorb it and feel it and appreciate it, and what they can appreciate about it, and just educate them in nature and in life. They're not going to do it anywhere else, and it's up to you. And so how important this is just to do that. Do you remember in the olden days when the elderly people would go for a walk at night, and they called it a constitution because they were doing other things besides, oh, I'm going for a walk, check, I did my walk. They were doing other things. They were learning. They were communing with God. They were appreciating their life. They were reassuring themselves and that the world was still there and things were normal. Fanny, you're a genius. Researchers have discovered that nature is such a powerful restorative. Even looking at nature scenes on a screen can fire up the dopamine reward system in our brains, increasing feelings of wellness, positive thoughts, and a greater drive to form emotional connections with others. No wonder love is in the air in Austen world. Yes, it's so important to get out there and to appreciate nature, and that's why I think everyone should dabble a little bit in art. Even if you painted a little square about that big and you just got into your watercolors and painted something every day, I think that the slowing it down and also the focus on nature is so restorative. So now I'm going to read tomorrow, or my next video, Austen Eats Garden Stuff. Now I'm going to show you how you who don't think that you're a gardener can just plant something in a pot and appreciate it even if all you get is one radish or one pea or one cucumber, just do it on purpose just to see the difference in the flavor and in the way that it makes you feel, in that instant feeling of revival when you eat it. You feel it instantly. And so this is called Austen Eats Garden Stuff, and he goes through and shows how important this is. So those of you who are not interested in what I'm going to speak about next, this is the end of the reading today from the Jane Austen Diet, and you can shut it off because I'm going to go show you a few things that I have made with the paper bag challenge. And the first thing that I did today was, you get these at the Dollar Tree, and the candles never really fit them very well, even when you buy the little piece that you put in to secure them. They're not well made. And so what I did today, I was going to go ahead and put this on my free table, and then I thought maybe I should keep it a little bit longer and use it for something. So today, with my paper bag challenge, using my chalk pen and a old bottle of brush on glitter paint in gold. I save everything, and because I always think there's going to be a depression. And my challenge was just to use as few ingredients as possible. I mainly used tape and the paper. So I made this candle out of a piece. This is one piece. This is not two pieces. I just drew the flame right on the paper bag and cut it out, and then I rolled the sides. And I will, somewhere on my blog, if you'll go to my blog and type in paper bag crafts, there's a pattern for this. And so I'm going to just put this in and show you that it sticks in really nicely and it catches the light quite nice. So that was one thing I did. So I just did small things today. And lately we have been to some gatherings at friends' house where people that know about the Regency period have really made a big deal of the tea luncheons and tea things. And so they like to try new recipes, and they always had a little, you can go to the dollar store and get these little chalkboard signs, and you stick them in the food so they could label what it was, like spinach dip and things like that. And so what I did is I took a toothpick and some tape, and I made my own to go into, what does this say? It says nut bread on there. I used the chalk pen, but you could use any color you want. And so then the other thing that I noticed they were doing was they were labeling the different flavored teas, because they would make, in this one place I went, these ladies were making different teas, flavors in different tea pots, and they had the Yorkshire Gold, and they had the English breakfast, and then they had peach tea, and they had bergamot and different kinds. So they were folding little pieces of paper and writing what the name of it was beside the teapot. So this is what I did, is made one of these, and as you can see, it's on a little stand. It's all one piece. I just folded a piece under it, and it just labels what the tea is. It says peach tea on it. And then the other thing was they were putting, when they had cookies or pieces or squares, sliced breads or something like that, they were putting just folded pieces of paper with the names on it. So that's what I did. Just to show you how you make this where it will sit, is you just make sure you have a fold at the bottom there, so that you don't have to do a lot of taping and things like that. So that says strawberry scones, and this one says nutmeg squares, something like that. So I will include pictures of that on the post if you want to see that. And so I'll just sign off by saying a few things and from my notes here today, and hopefully you will get something done while you listen to the rest. So because I read this chapter from Brian Kozlowski's book on nighttime, then I'm going to, as governor of this page and this radio program and of my house here in the Bants, I'm going to mandate something, and it's an antiviral mandate and activity. and that is to try to go to sleep and without too much overhead lights or electric lights, and try to spend at least one evening in a natural light. Also, to go outside when there is a full moonlight and walk around there and experience it. And also, I can remember growing up in the autumn, there were those great big moons, walking in a garden or someone's cornfield at night was quite an adventure. And children love to go out at night. It would take away their restlessness if they're encouraged to walk at night in nature. So that's my mandate. Walk at night in nature or in the evening, and don't use artificial light if you can possibly help it before you go to bed. And let's see if it makes a difference in your sleep, those two things. And it's a mandate, and it goes on just the day that you watch this, okay? Because I've got a lot more sense than a lot of governors. I know when to quit. So that's the mandate, and those are both antiviral. So people should be happy with that. Okay, so that was the brown paper bag challenge, and I encourage you to do that yourself. And so now, what did people do in the olden days when they had sleeplessness or anxiety, or when they couldn't focus because someone had given them bad news, or they were startled by what the world was doing, or they were just unable to concentrate on anything? Well, they would get busy and fix something, or they would get busy and sort something, put something in order, or they would write a letter, or they would sing, or they would read. Now, if you've got something on your mind that's really bothering you, reading, you can look at the page and not see it at all. Don't you remember in that Jeanette Oak book, which was made into the movie called Love Comes Softly, and Marty was getting ready to go back east after having come over in the wagon train to the west, and she had spent the winter there, and in the spring she was going to go home, and she was reading a book, and her husband said, "I haven't seen you turn a page in over an hour," or something like that. And she said, I just can't seem to concentrate, because she was thinking about the trauma of going back to her home. And so it is hard when you've got something on your mind to focus on a book or to read. So that, in that case, it might be better just to start sweeping, start washing, start folding. And this is one of the reasons I think some of the old people liked, especially the women, liked to wash things by hand, is that it was a movement of the hands which kind of changed things in the mind. So I know a lot of people are into music, they play the piano, they play the fiddle, and it seems to stabilize their minds. And so maybe some of us just need to learn to do that. I'll get some of my grandkids to teach me when they come next time. Maybe I'll become a famous fiddler or something like that. I might amount to something someday. Isn't that exciting? So the other thing that you can do is read aloud, and just take a paragraph from something and read aloud. So I'm going to just read from one of my favorite verses is from 2 John, and it's 1 and 2. And the reason that I like it so much is because it's so nice when a mother or father sees their children and grandchildren walking in the light and walking in the same traditions and beliefs as they were, and doing it better, or being even more creative. I mean, we always want our children to do better than ourselves, and that doesn't mean just live in a better house or have a better income or have a less hardship. That just means we wish that they would take our experiences, our knowledge, and use it to improve themselves. And we're always delighted when they do better spiritually or creatively or creatively or even physically or in knowledge. And so I know that's why I identify so much. I love this verse. It says, to the elder to the elect lady and her children, whom I love in truth, and not only I, but all who know the truth, because of the truth that abides in us and will be with us forever. I rejoiced greatly to find some of your children walking in the truth, just as we were commanded by the Father. Now, isn't that nice? The Apostle John was happy that his children, and I suppose he meant by that is that his converts, his people that he had taught, were walking in the truth. Isn't it nice to visit people you haven't seen in a long time and to see that the world and the trials of life have not changed them? And so that's one of the things that I like so much about that. And that's something we should all strive for. Do you remember in, what was it? Our mutual friend and John Rokesmith said to Bella, if you could only know how happy it makes me to see that all these things have not changed you. So, now ladies, I hope that this will help you get a few things done today, and I'm sorry it's not an hour, but it's better than nothing, and I hope to see you more often. So please continue your comments, and I appreciate those of you who would like to support me. My PayPal is on the side bar of the page on which I am placing this. If you're new here, please go and listen to this video on that page, because it will have the photographs and the other things and maybe a summary of the things that I talked about. So ladies, I hope you have a blessed evening and that you sleep well. And I'll see you later. Bye.